Welcome back, you lovely bunch. Thanks for tuning in again. I hope you're all doing good. Right, today we're going to be talking about flat bar gravel bikes. Are they just cross-country bikes? Are they a scam made up by the bike industry? Who would buy them? Who are they for? Are you better off with a flat bar gravel bike, a drop bar gravel bike, a cross-country bike? Is there any difference between any of them? That is what we're going to discuss in today's video. But if you're new to the channel, you will know that I like to have a little bit of a ride before I get stuck into the chitter chatter. So if you do want just my thoughts on flat bar gravel bikes, feel free to skip ahead a little bit past all the lovely riding footage of this beautiful Devon scenery. This is the most fun bike for this trail. This is the Marin DSX FS. Enough waffling. If you want to know more about it, stay tuned. Right, let's go. Right, that is an hour of smashy bike riding done, out the way, and I'm going to have a little bit of a chat to you about flat bar gravel bikes and how they are actually a little bit different to cross-country bikes. They're a little bit different to gravel bikes. They are somewhere in the middle. So a lot of people do say these flat bars do just make this a cross-country bike. Well, actually, I would argue that they don't, because it's not just a set of flat bars that make it a cross-country bike. For example, putting flat bars on a cyclocross bike is not going to make that a cross-country bike. And that's because there are quite a few differences between a gravel bike, a flat bar gravel bike, and a cross-country mountain bike. I said this sits in the middle of a cross-country bike and a gravel bike, and the reason for that is, quite simply, the geometry. So mountain bikes have quite slack geometry, you know, you're riding down quite aggressive terrain. So a downhill bike is going to have much slacker geometry, head tubes, like seat tubes, all that, than a cross-country bike, because the hills you're riding down are much steeper, therefore you want a much slacker geometry. A gravel bike has much slacker geometry than, say, a road bike, because we don't want that like fast, nippy like speed that you want from a road bike. You want something a little bit more relaxed, but you don't want it to be a cross-country bike because we're also riding on the road. And this is when we get to the flat bar gravel bike. So the geometry of this frame, it sits somewhere between my gravel bike and a cross-country bike. So in frame design and angles, it's not quite a cross-country bike, because it's a little bit too steep to be a proper cross-country bike, but that also makes it very comfortable on the road. But then the head tube angle and the seat tube are a little bit slacker than my gravel bike, so it does feel more stable going down the more rocky, gnarly stuff. You know, the bike feels more planted, I'm getting bounced about less. I mean, it wouldn't be as fast on the flat, but on the more aggressive terrain, that's where this comes into its own. The geometry puts it between a gravel bike and a cross-country bike, so therefore it's not either. So that's why it can be a flat bar gravel bike. And the next thing is spacing. Spacing on the wheels. This is a set of gravel wheels. They are spaced for a gravel frame. They're not spaced for a cross-country frame, so it's not as wide at the rear end. It's not designed to take as much abuse as a cross-country bike. It's designed to take abuse, and it took a little bit of that today, but not as much abuse as a cross-country bike. And surprisingly, it can take more abuse than a gravel bike. So it's sitting again somewhere in the middle. So, I mean, people are going to be like, well, isn't it just a really short travel cross-country bike? And I'm like, well, I guess it could be, but like, where do we draw the line? You know, that's why people have decided to call them flat bar gravel bikes, because they are essentially more teetering towards a gravel bike than a mountain bike. The thing that really makes it more mountain bikey is the flat bars and the suspension fork. But again, the suspension fork is designed to be used with a set of gravel wheels. It's designed to be used on gravel. It's a Suntour GVL. I think it's got like 60 mil of travel, so a tiny little bit of travel there. So not as much travel as you'd get on a cross-country bike, but a lot more travel than you'd get on a gravel bike. This bike is genuinely the most capable bike I own. The route that I took today, I rode yesterday, and I rode it on my carbon gravel bike with carbon wheels, and do you know what, fun as it wasn't as fun as it was on this bike. So if I were to compare the stock model of this bike and the stock model of my gravel bike, this is half the price. This is £1,500. I mean, obviously you do not get the funky paint job, the funky wheels, the electronic shifting, like the tyres, the things. I've pretty much changed everything on this bike apart from the brakes and the seat post. But for what you're paying and what you're getting, the stock model is a really good bike. So there we go, a lot of waffle, a lot to digest. Something I missed out is, who's going to buy this? Like, who is this designed for? I think this bike is the perfect gateway bike to gravel. Like, if you're riding mountain bikes and you want to get into gravel, like changing to a drop bar bike is a big transition. Whereas changing to a flat bar bike, it feels very much the same. You know, you're used to a mountain bike and you want to get more into like the light gravel, like road. Like, yes, you could go all in and just buy a gravel bike, but if you weren't really feeling the comfort of a gravel bike and you weren't wanting to be all like drop bar, I think a flat bar gravel bike would be honestly perfect for a lot of people that are doing that transition from mountain biking into gravel or are getting into gravel for the first time. Most people that cycle, ride about just casually, they're not using drop bars, and jumping on a drop bar bike is a big enough transition as it is without then having to learn how to ride off-road on a drop bar bike. Whereas this gives you something you're very much used to, puts you in a position you're used to. It has geometry that's like slack enough to handle off-road, but also comfortable on the road. So that is why I would say that this flat bar gravel bike, or flat bar gravel bikes in general, are something that is actually needed in the cycle industry. It's not just something that's been created to like make people spend money. They've actually been created to fill a little bit of a gap, and I was very, very surprised to enjoy this bike as much as I do. So much so you can tell that I've like given it a fancy paint job. I've put electronic shifting on it. We've got funky wheels, beautiful chainring, a nice crankset. Like, I've slowly been upgrading this bike because what started as a bike that I wasn't sure what it was designed for has turned into something that I really enjoy riding, and I will pick to ride this bike over other bikes. My only gripe actually with Marin about this frame set is why haven't they got a carbon version? I would love a carbon version of this. I was looking at the headlands and thinking of maybe I could turn the headlands into a flat bar gravel bike, but then the geometry and all that is just a little bit different, and I think that it suits this geometry better, you know, like the Marin DSX FS and the DSX models, they're designed with a specific purpose, and the headlands frame just isn't the same as that. And although it's like a nice carbon frame, I think the geometry of this frame suits the purpose better. So I can only hope that one day Marin release a carbon DSX FS. Thank you as always for watching. I really appreciate you guys taking the time to watch the videos, comment on the videos. Appreciate all the support. Remember to like, comment and subscribe, and I'll catch you guys very soon. Bye.